In recent weeks, XRP, the cryptocurrency tied to payments company Ripple, has surged into the spotlight with a wave of major announcements. Investors are watching as the US SEC suddenly greenlights multiple XRP-based ETFs, while international markets see the very first spot XRP ETF debut in Brazil. At the same time, Ripple scored key regulatory victories, including SEC appeals being dropped and a new stablecoin approval that have turbocharged optimism. This video will break down these developments and explain what they mean for XRP holders and crypto investors. One dramatic headline came on April 28, 2025, when ETF issuer ProShares received tacit SEC approval to launch 3 new XRP-based exchange-traded funds. These funds, a 2x Ultra XRP ETF, a 1x Short XRP ETF, and a -2x Ultra Short XRP ETF, will track XRP's price via futures contracts rather than holding XRP itself. The leveraged structure lets traders bet on XRP going up or down without owning the token. This follows a month of ETF developments. A Teucrium 2x Long XRP Futures ETF launched in early April, hailed as a most successful debut with over $5 million in volume on day one, and now these ProShares products are set to go live on April 30th. US Futures ETFs. The ProShares ETFs are scheduled for an April 30th, 2025 effective date. According to SEC filings, ProShares picked that date using a rule that allows the funds to launch without extra review if the SEC raises no objections. No SEC objection was made, so barring technical delays, the Ultra, Short and Ultra Short XRP ETFs should debut that Wednesday. Crypto commentators emphasize that these are futures-based products. They will use indexes and swap contracts to mirror XRP's price movements. In other words, they let investors speculate on XRP without touching real coins. Meanwhile, internationally, an XRP ETF has already arrived in Brazil. On April 25, Brazilian exchange B3 began trading XRP-H11, an XRP ETF created by asset manager Hashdex in partnership with Genial Investimentos. This fund, billed as the world's first XRP ETF in press releases, tracks the Nasdaq XRP Reference Price Index and holds at least 95% of its assets in XRP. It expands Hashdex's lineup of single-asset crypto ETFs. They already offer Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana products in Brazil. Hashdex hopes the XRP-H11 ETF will attract institutional and sophisticated investors to XRP via regulated channels. These moves come as related crypto markets heat up. On April 21, CME Group announced it will launch XRP futures, alongside BTC, ETH, and SOL futures, on May 19, 2025, further legitimizing XRP in derivatives markets. Overall, XRP, currently the world's fourth largest cryptocurrency, has seen blistering price action. By April 25, XRP was trading around $2.18, roughly a 480% jump over the prior month. All this ETF activity and market momentum means XRP is squarely on traders' radars. The ETF enthusiasm is underpinned by a swift shift in U.S. crypto regulation. In mid-March 2025, new SEC leadership signaled a far friendlier stance toward digital assets. President Trump's pick, Paul Atkins, was confirmed as SEC chair on April 9, after a campaign promising clearer rules for crypto. On March 19, Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse announced that the SEC would drop its appeal in the multi-year Ripple lawsuit. This effectively ends the SEC's challenge to XRP sales on public exchanges, a fact Garlinghouse called historic. Ripple still has a pending appeal on one part of the case, but the SEC's retreat is widely seen as a win. Around the same time, Kraken confirmed the SEC agreed to dismiss its lawsuit with no penalties, and the SEC quietly ended its suit against Coinbase. In short, many of the SEC's high-profile enforcement actions have been rolled back. Another major regulatory development: in late 2024, New York regulators gave conditional approval to Ripple's planned dollar-backed stablecoin, RUST. The NYDFS sign-off, announced December 2024, means Rust can launch on the XRP ledger and Ethereum, opening doors for banks and crypto firms to integrate it. This approval is seen as a concrete sign of trust from U.S. regulators. In combination with the halted SEC cases, it has cleared extensive regulatory headwinds for XRP. Analysts say these changes, plus a pro-crypto U.S. Congress, give XRP a much stronger legal footing going forward. With the tailwinds of ETF approvals and regulatory clarity, investors are taking notice of XRP's new potential. On the one hand, the introduction of regulated XRP futures ETFs provides new vehicles for both retail and institutional money. It's only a matter of time before even more mainstream firms join in, argues ETF expert Nate Geraci. In fact, many major fund issuers have already filed, or are expected to file, for XRP ETFs, with Bitwise, 21 Shares, WisdomTree, Franklin Templeton, and others in the race. BlackRock, which pioneered spot Bitcoin ETFs, has not yet filed for XRP, but observers predict it won't stay on the sidelines for long. On the other hand, investors should note key distinctions and risks. The ProShares and Teucrium ETFs are futures-based and leveraged, not holding any actual XRP. That means their performance can diverge from spot XRP over time due to roll costs and leverage decay. A spot XRP ETF, holding XRP directly, has not yet been approved in the US. Applications from Grayscale, Franklin, and others are still pending. Decisions are being delayed into mid-2025. In fact, Nate Geraci pointedly asked why the SEC cleared multiple futures ETFs before allowing any spot XRP ETF. Until spot ETFs are allowed, direct institutional buying of XRP remains limited to OTC deals or crypto exchanges. From a market perspective, the changes have turned XRP into a near-term momentum trade. Price charts show XRP posting the biggest percentage gain among major crypto tokens over the last 30 days. Some traders treat the $2.00 level as a psychological milestone, and note that several technical indicators line up around $2 to $2.20. But long-term investors are now also eyeing how XRP could function in financial ecosystems. With Ripple's on-ledger stablecoin and its cross-border payments network, RippleNet, many argue XRP is better positioned than most altcoins to see real-world demand. As one cryptocurrency betting market noted, after the legal victory, the odds of a US XRP ETF approval jumped to over 80%. So far, these developments have sent ripples through the crypto market. In mid-April 2025, XRP briefly climbed to around $2.50, briefly overtaking Tether to become the number 3 cryptocurrency by market cap. It later settled near $2.20 as volatility eased. As of late April, XRP's market capitalization was well over $300 billion. This surge came even as most other top tokens were flat or down, indicating XRP-specific drivers at work. Trading volumes and ETF futures flows have also spiked, with analytics firms reporting institutional accounts taking positions in XRP futures ahead of the ETF's debut. However, markets are also pricing in uncertainty. The SEC Ripple lawsuit, while largely resolved, is not completely finished. Ripple still has an unresolved appeal on one judgment from 2023. Traders know that if remaining legal issues flare up, it could affect XRP's price. Moreover, the very nature of leveraged futures ETFs means wild swings are possible, especially if crypto markets turn rocky. Nonetheless, most analysts believe these ETFs lower the barrier for big investors who were previously on the sidelines, setting up XRP for potentially higher institutional inflows down the line. Looking ahead, the big questions for XRP include: will we see an approved spot XRP ETF next? If so, when? Many industry watchers now expect one or more spot XRP ETFs to be approved in 2025, given the regulatory tailwinds. The SEC has until May 22, 2025 to act on Grayscale's spot XRP ETF application, and December deadlines loom for others. Approval of a spot ETF would likely be a watershed moment, potentially unlocking much larger capital flows. Meanwhile, developments like the CME's upcoming XRP futures, May 19th launch, and Ripple's stablecoin launch, expected soon, will add more utility and liquidity to the XRP ecosystem. Institutional interest is likely to grow if these ETFs attract positive returns. Some analysts forecast that firms like BlackRock and Fidelity could file for their own XRP ETF to capture this market. However, investors should be cautious. Rapid price moves can reverse as quickly as they came. Key support levels around $2 may be tested, and retail sentiment can shift in a fickle market. The broader crypto regulatory landscape is also in flux. While the US is currently friendly, future legislation, such as around stablecoins or DeFi, could introduce new headwinds. For now, though, XRP's immediate future looks robust. With ETFs and legal clarity on its side, XRP is positioned for further growth, albeit with the usual crypto volatility. Conclusion: in summary, XRP has experienced a whirlwind of news, from the SEC permitting leveraged futures ETFs on XRP, to the first spot XRP ETF launching in Brazil, to a landmark ending of Ripple's US regulatory battle. For cryptocurrency investors, this means XRP is stepping into the mainstream financial spotlight. The new ETFs will give regulated access to XRP's price movements, potentially driving up institutional demand. The relaxed regulatory climate, with SEC appeals dropped and new stablecoins approved, bodes well for the token's legitimacy. Overall, these factors are causing bullish sentiment. Many analysts now expect XRP to continue performing strongly in the months ahead. As always, investors should stay informed and weigh both the opportunities and risks in this evolving landscape.